Tēnā tātou katoa. Te mea tuatahi, he karakia.
Whakapainga mai, whakatehau ki te uru, whakatehau ki te tonga kia mā kina te ita, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi ake ana te ātākura, he te o he huka, he hauhunga, haue, huie, tārangi. Te mea tuarua, he mihi poto tēnei, engari he mihi whakahirahira. Nau mai, hara mai ki tēnei whare, te Puna Matauranga o Aotearoa. He whare māhana tēnei, nau mai. Haria wā matariki, he wā hōhonu whakaaro, he wā whakaaro whakawhetai, nau mai. Te mea tuatoru ko wai au, he uri tēnei no te arawa waka, no Ngāti Porou, me ngai tahu hoki, ko hala pōtiki tōku ingoa, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. A very warm Wellington welcome to you, albeit not such a warm Wellington evening. First and foremost, thank you all for coming out this evening and joining us on this occasion. This event is about hearing the voices of Wahine on issues regarding voting and democracy. It's a time of reflection, a time of raising voices, not just vocal but through gesture, and a time for us to celebrate mana wahine. Afterwards, we're also going to have an opportunity to share Kai and Kōrero together as a group, kotahi, so I welcome you all to stay on for that as well. He Tohu is home of three important taonga. The 1835 He Whakaputanga, the Declaration of Independence of the United Tribes of New Zealand, the 1840 Tiriti or Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi, and the 1893 Women Suffrage petition, the petihana whakamana Whakatū Wāhine. This is a special place, this is a special house, and it's a safe house. However, if Ruo Moko decides to do a bit of a dance tonight, we're still going to have to take a bit of action. So if there's an earthquake, and this is my health and safety briefing, by the way, if there is an earthquake, we just need to get down to the ground, take cover and stay there until the shaking stops, and you'll receive further directions from staff. If we need to evacuate the building this evening, please go through the main glass doors. Many of you would have come through those to enter into the building, onto Molesworth Street, and staff will direct us where to go from there. More likely than an earthquake or an evacuation, though, is the event that you might need to use the wharepaku. So this piece of information is possibly a little more useful. The wharepaku are just behind you and on this side of the building in the stairwell there. And I'd like to turn our attention to the reason why you're all here, and that's to listen to our speakers. So I'd like to introduce them very briefly. They all have really important stories, interesting stories to share with us this evening. So this part for me is going to be quite brief so that we can move on to the speakers. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Mona Pauline Mangakahia, Ngāti Tamatera, Ngāti Kuia, Ngāti Kōrero. Mona's a senior project leader at the Māori Electoral Commission, and Mona's whānau here, so big mihi to you for joining us this evening. Secondly, I'd like to introduce Julia Whaipoti. She's Ngāti Porou, spokesperson for Just Speak and Senior Advisor, Office of the Children's Commissioner. Moana Ormsby, Ngāti Porou. Anyone would think I stacked the speaking list tonight. I didn't, but just saying, there's a few of us here this evening. And Moana is Kai Whakaako for Public Programs right here in the National Library. I'd like to introduce Michelle Hippolyte Waikato, Rongo Whakaata, Te Aitanga a Mahaki. Michelle's the Chief Executive of Te Puni Kōkiri, the Ministry of Māori Development. And my final introduction goes to our first speaker this evening, and that's for Honourable Julianne Genta and her +1. Honourable Genta.
7 nights.
+7 nights. Honourable Genta is the Minister for Women. So without any further delay, I'd like to hand the rākau over to Minister Genta to get us started this evening. Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Nā mihi whakanui kia koutou, kia tātou katoa. Te mea tūtahi, nā mihi kia ranganui, rawa ko papatuanuku tēnā kōrero. Tuarua ki nā tini mā te kua, haere ki te po, haere, haere, haere. Nā mihi ki nā mana whanua. Ki te whare e tune, tēnā koe. Kia koutou e hui hui mai nei, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Pererangi te waka, ko Sierra Nevada te monga, ko Yuba te awa, ko te moana nui a kiwa te moana, ko Ngāti Americana, ko Ngāti Pākehā na iwi, no Karaponia aho, ko Tamaki Makaurau, toku kainga I Naianei, ko Julianne Genter aho. Thank you so much, Helen, for the karakia and welcome, and your warm greetings to all of us. I'd like to thank the National Library of New Zealand, Te Puna Matauranga, o Aotearoa, for hosting this hui as a partnership with Ministry for Women Minitatanga mō ngā Wahine. I welcome the Green Party co-leader, my colleague Marama Davidson, and other members of Parliament who are here today. I want to acknowledge all of the Māori women in Parliament and those who paved the way, such as Iriaka, the first Māori woman MP who won the seat of Western Māori in the 1949 general election. And thanks to the Wahine Toa for leading us in this kōrero, Helen Podaki, Michelle Hippolyte, Mona Pauline Mangakahia, Julia Thai Poti, and Moana Ormsby. Thank you so much. I know that you're not here to listen to me tonight, but I will say a few words because I think it's very important for the office of Minister for Women to acknowledge the incredible role that Wahine Māori played in the struggle to get the vote that we have had for 125 years. And I think the 125th anniversary of universal suffrage in Aotearoa provides us an opportunity to make further progress for women and girls, and that we must make further progress for Wahine Māori in particular. Māori women were changing the world even before women secured the right to vote in Aotearoa. In the last part of the 19th century, Māori women were involved in two suffrage movements, and I want to remember Mary Te Tai Mangakahia, who was the first woman to speak to Te Kōtahitanga, the Māori Parliament. Excuse me, I'm a bit breathless. I found that I get a bit ahead of myself in speaking these days, getting less oxygen to my lungs because someone else is stealing it. Mary asked that women have the right to vote and to stand as members of that parliament. And her great-granddaughter, Mona Pauline Mangakahia, is one of the speakers here tonight. It's an honor to have her here and bring the memory of her tupuna with her. Mary argued on the grounds, very legitimate grounds, that many Māori women owned and administered their own lands, either because they had no male relatives or because the women were more competent, as sometimes happens. Mary concluded in Te Reo that perhaps the Queen may listen to the petitions if they are presented by her Māori sisters, since she is a woman as well. So this was taking place simultaneously with other suffrage movement to gain votes in the New Zealand Parliament. And I think the broad suffrage movement was a collaboration between Māori women and Pākehā women. But probably, if it weren't for the leadership of Māori women here in Aotearoa, and indeed the precedent that had already been set in terms of a more gender equal approach to management of affairs than perhaps was common in the European West at that time, that actually Pākehā women were able to fight and organize and win the right to vote here in Aotearoa first in the world, precisely because it was Aotearoa. And Māori women were showing that leadership. There's also Niniwa i te rangi, often known as Niniwa Heremaya. So she was a close friend of Mary Te Tai Mangekahia. She regularly spoke on the marae in a district in which this was not common practice. She had her own newspaper and worked on at least 3 other newspapers. Māori women got the right to vote, won the right to vote in Kotahitanga parliamentary elections in 1897. So we want to do more to highlight our wahine toa and their mahi. And this event, Wahine kōkiri petihana, Wahine kōkiri kaupapa, is central to the kaupapa for Suffrage 125 celebrations, as we focus on highlighting mana wahine. As well as Mary Te Tai Mangekahia, some of the wahine toa who historically have been instrumental to improving the rights of New Zealand women are Hene Pore, Arete Mahupuku, Akene Tomoana, Sophia Herangi, Takere Te Hoihui, and Niniwa i te rangi. The Māori and Pākehā women who led the fight for women's suffrage were determined, strong-minded, committed to the cause. They were articulate and hardworking, and they collected petition signatures in the days when transport consisted of a horse and cart, walking through muddy streets, and eventually, very importantly, the bicycle. So tonight, I just want to welcome everyone here and say that I look forward to the perspectives that we're going to hear on voting and democracy and how we can achieve greater equality in New Zealand, not just for women, but in particular for Māori women who have been leaders for so long and deserve greater recognition of this in our society. Kia ora koutou.
Thank you, Minister Gita. For those of us who are familiar with the workings of government, either from within or without, will know that you've had a very, very busy day today, and we appreciate your time, we appreciate your whakaro here this evening, so ngā mihi kia koe, Mr Gita. I'd now like to invite my tuakana, Michelle Hippolyte, up to the microphone for your address. Oh, you have a special, oh, okay, right. Do you introduce that? Is it working?
Is this working? Kia ora tātou, tēnei pō whakanui. Tai tātou I tēnei pō ki te whakarongo I ngā whakaaro. O te kaupapa nei o te Minitatanga o ngā wahine I tēnei pō. Kia koe te minita, tēnā koe. Ki te tuahine I te whare paremata, tēnā hoki koe. Ki ngā whānau e tau nei I tēnei pō, tēnā koutou katoa. Minister stole the speech, so you know. Really great to hear about the courageous Māori women who continued on a pathway of standing up in Aotearoa. So I want to talk about 3 women. One of them is on the board at the moment. She's not my tupuna by whakapapa, although I tātai to her because I married a Ngāti Toa warrior. And so Rangi Topiora is a woman of moral courage. I reflect upon her as somebody who went into battle. So she wasn't a silent partner sitting in the second row, poking the first row to do the right things on their pai. She was somebody that was right up the front. And she used her taiaha often in the days of when Ngāti Toa and Kawhia, or as I like to say to my husband, in the period where they didn't do what we wanted them to do in Waikato, so we sent them on their way to Porirua. And she is a legend amongst the Ngāti Toa people. And she's also a legend in Porirua. So I'm also the chair of Te Kura Māori o Porirua, our kura out that way of town. And when our wahine go to kapas and go to the regionals, they actually personify Rangi Topiora with the 4 feathers in their hair. because that's the sort of influence a courageous woman who has moral courage is able to lead the way and work alongside her cousins, her male cousins, but be a beacon of possibility and hope for all the wahine who belong to Ngāti Toa. Miri Mangakahi has been talked about a lot, and when I was a young analyst in the Ministry for Women's Affairs, as I was then, we learnt a lot about her tenacity in the period where English law and the import of English law in Aotearoa had such an impact that to be able to break that cycle and to join with other women to go on that pathway was a radical move. And I'm going to leave it for her Puna to talk more about Miri, because she is famous in her own right for, again, creating the pathway for Māori women to see the validity of civil democracy and what it meant at that time and what it means today. And then the third woman I want to talk a little bit about is Te Puia Hirangi, a queer of, a bit like Rangi Tupiora, somebody of moral courage, high moral courage, such that she too, said to the men when they were being conscripted to go to the north, out where men in Waikato, no, you're not to go to that war. And they all were imprisoned for a period because they were following her guidance that actually we don't always have to fight somebody else's war. And as many of you will know, she's also the architect, she's the designer, she's the RMA consent person that created what we know today as Tūranga Waiwai Marae. But the stories about how to have that moral courage to keep leading in a time where there was both opportunity and turbulence, I think that's what today is, an opportunity for me alongside my tuahine to just spend a little bit of time about the courage of Māori women. The beauty of all these three women is that they're related to their whakapapa. And in whakapapa, we always find the people who demonstrate such focus and such big visions about what is possible. And to be able to have the vote in Aotearoa New Zealand and so soon around the world. We were one of the first countries, along with others, to enable Wahine to have the vote. And I think that personifies actually the strength of us Wahine who are here tonight, along with our tāne. We can't do this alone sometimes. We do need the support of our tāne to support the idea that women's voice matters. So I realised that this matters when I was thinking about whether I should become the Chief Executive of Te Puni kōkiri. I was going to be breaking a tradition where they were usually about 50 plus, all had been male. Would, and it was, the public sector ready for another change that would demonstrate and back that actually Māori women can do the roles that are usually reserved for, or have been, taken up by men folk. And the three women that I talk about, Rangi Tupiora, Miri Mangakahia and Te Puia, all trailblazers in their own right. And guess what, Wahine Ma? We can be trailblazers in our own right too. Whatever you might decide to do, because I know you already all vote. We hope many of you watched our Wili Wairua app, that we created a digital app and used the digital platform to encourage rangatahi between the ages of 15 and 29 to enrol and then also to vote. And it's something that we haven't done as Te Puni kōkiri. We thought, gee, this is a bit out of our comfort zone. Should we be doing this? Is it the right political thing to do? But because we had a neutral political voice, we brought neutrality to wanting to make sure that rangatahi Māori, Wahine and tāne were enrolled, because we know it was pretty poor. We were one of the partners with the Electoral Commission And of course I'm going to attribute that the rise in the enrolment is associated with the work that we did alongside our friends and cousins of the Electoral Commission, because we saw a rise in the enrolment of Māori rangatahi. We also saw a rise in the voting of Māori rangatahi. I know that's not just attributable to the work that we did. I know it must have had something to do with having polling booths in the malls, that it must have something to do when polling booths went to the places where Māori worked. So they went to the orchards, they went to places where there was a high Māori working population, and we got them to vote. They wouldn't tell them who to vote for, of course, but that's a really big significant step of which the Wahine who were part of their first time that they voted and then being able to cast a vote is all about creating the legacy and a story that they hopefully will pass on to their mokopuna, just like Rangatiratanga has passed on to my daughter. And what's really important to be a Ngāti Toa woman, we hear from Bona soon about her tupuna and that being passed on to her. And then to Puya, who's mine, and Auntie Bella, who's sitting over there, our tupuna, and it's passed on to us. Because whakapapa matters, and we are all part of the generation to ensure that the legacy lives on. Tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. I should take that a little higher. Waikato te awa katoia he wai mau kai ke ki te puaha. Waikato te awa he piko he tani whai, piko he tani whai. Tu patora kei tauri koe i ngā kahao. Waikato whakamau to titiro, whitira koutou peri te maunga potatau te tangata te Māori o te motu e. E oi tō waka ki ngā rua wahi atu ranga wai mō te ao katoa. E tongi whakamutu ngā mātu tai rau e hoki au e. Kia ora. Tēnā koe te tuhine, and I can attest to the pathway that Michelle is laying down for many of us who are working in the public sector. So thank you for taking time out this evening, Michelle. I'd now like to hand the lectern and the microphone over to my Ngāti Pro tuakana, Moana Okumspe. Tēnā Okumspe, hei mai, hara mai, kia ora. Ka huri ta hureo, ki te hiku o te ika, ki te hiku o te rangi, I rumara wahe. E hine e tama, e koro e kui, ta huri mai, whakarongo mai.
Koutou kei ngā mani tātaki, hara mai rā ngā kānohi ki tēnei te mihi atu. Mai I hupurangi ki te pai rāwhiti ki hiwarau ki te kōko ohiwa. He uri tēnei o ngā tai moana o ngā papa whenua tēnā koutou katoa. E toro atu nei te reo whakamanua ki tēnā o tātou. E huti ake rā I te māhanahanatanga o tātou whare. Whakawhaitu mai ai ki konei ki raro I ngā tāwharautanga o tō tātou whare e tu atu nei, e mihi nei kia tātou. Koutou kei ngā mana o te Puna Matauranga o Aotearoa, ka tikatu rā tēnei kia koutou, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou e manaaki mai nei I ngā mātāwa ko te motu, e whakaahuru nei ngā taonga a kuima a kuruma. Tahuri mai ai tātou ki te kaupapa I karangahia mai ai tātou ki konei, otira ki ngā kāhui Kai Kōrero o te wā, tēnā koutou katoa. Ka nui hoki rā ngā pahupahu whakanui o tēnei. Me waihoa ke rā mau koutou haruru ke o tātou rangatira e pania ki te mihi. Nō reira, aupiki mai, aukake mai, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Moana, and I am Kai Whakāko here at National Library, and I'm here to share a story. Yeah. So when I was asked to speak tonight, I'm a ring-in, so right. And I thought, okay, what is the kaupapa? And the kaupapa was women, voting, and democracy. So I had to pull out the phone and say, sorry, what's democracy? And when I read the definition, I thought, heka, I did not grow up in a house where democracy was exercised. I grew up with a grandmother who made up the rules as we went along, changed them when she felt like it, and absolutely ruled the nest. So my whole life I have walked through exercising my total mana wahine and tino rangatiratanga. I've left a wake of chaos sometimes, but not really feeling that I needed to define myself politically. My grandmother's political tendencies was Winston Peters because he was a good boy. He helped my parents buy their first house, so no matter what he did after that, he was the angel in her eyes. Plus, you know, she knew his father, and they had this hormone also. That was politically, that was what I saw. In my adult life, when I look back at my childhood, my grandmother was part of the Māori Women's Welfare League. Was active in Church of England on Sunday, but from Monday to Saturday she was Rangatiratanga. So these might seem conflicting to some people, but my life was conflicting to me sometimes. Her view of the world and the things that she taught me were all about mana wahine and acknowledging the goddess in all women, the balance between dark and light, men and women, which by the way is not 50-50. I know you think balance is 50%, it's actually not, right? It's kind of more like 80-20. But exercising that and being able to negotiate our way through life, being absolutely firm and confident in who you were and where you came from as a woman. And I don't mean my parents, I mean I descend from goddesses and gods. I am of Hine Tīpama, I'm of Hine Ahone, I'm of Whaiarikoriko, I'm all that, all this. So now that I'm working in this beautiful place, which is a privilege, I get to engage with people in my total authentic self and get paid for it. But give people the confidence and the knowledge to understand their absolute mana, whether they're women or men, but how that relationship is dependent on each other, and that without that balance things get a bit weird, which can sometimes happen anyway. So and this conversation is pretty organic, right, because I had nothing prepared. I'm just standing up here talking, and so now my church days and Sunday school kicking in, public speaking.
Te pohiri
Wahine, he taonga koe ki roto I te whare taonga o te Puna Matauranga o Aotearoa mihi ki a koe. I'd now like to pass the mic over, the speaking slot over to Mona Pauline Makahia. Mona Mahara.
Mai te he kua te ka hokianga whakapau karakia, whakate rāwhiti ki te ākau o te kapa moana. Hoki atu rā ki te riu o Waikato ko whare puhunga. Whakate tonga te haere ki te kōpū o te tōrua. Whakawhiti atu rā te moana o rau kawakawa. Ngā wai whakaripo o muturangi e. Peka atu rā ki te ākau ko Tiriti te rangi ki te pokohiwi o kupe. Ka titiro whakarunga ko ngā maunga ti tōhea, ko tūtū māpau, ko ngā tapuai o uenukuena. Ki ngā tini mate o tātou, o ia rohe, o ia marae, huri noa I te ao. O ki atu rā koutou, o ki atu rā ki te kahui ariki e tatiri maira, o ki atu rā marunga I te waka o tamarerete. Kia tātou e nohonoho nei I raro I te maru o tēnei nā whare, mai ōku awa, ōku maunga, ki o koutou maunga, ki o koutou awa, tēnā tātou katoa. As you already know, I am the great-granddaughter through whāngai of Minitatanga Kahia, and I'd like to acknowledge my papa, who was whāngai by Miri's son, who's sitting at the back there this evening. Miri te tai, no te rarawa ia, she was from Hokianga, and she was recognised as a leading suffragette of her time. As Minister Genta has alluded to, she presented at a motion in the Kōtahitanga Parliament in Hawke's Bay in 1893, the first woman who is known to have done so. Miri's kōrero was not only about women having the right to vote, but for women to stand in Parliament. Kia whakamana te reo o te wahine, te mana o te wahine, and for their voices to be heard alongside te manatane. Many of the reasons she gave for this position were in line with the roles that our wahine had with managing whenua. Husbands, brothers and fathers had passed on, leaving women as kaitaki. One of the reasons that stand out for me, and I quote, "There are many women who are knowledgeable of the management of land where their husbands were not." And again, she suggested to Parliament that the Queen would listen to petitions presented by her Māori sisters, as she was a woman herself. This argument for equality, as I see it, it was based on a practical day-to-day reality of our wahine in that time. But this concept is not a new one. Right back in our stories of creation, we have evidence of partnership and working together. Back to Io, Raiwa ko Whaere Koriko, back to Papa and Rangi. The female essence right there next to the male essence, each with their own mana. This moment, 126 years ago, a kākano was sown, which now continues to be cultivated by the generations of her descendants and the descendants of her peers. Anō nei I te Aotearoa pū, in the political world, the very first wahine, Rangatiratanga, elected 50 years later, 1949. 50 years after Miri spoke about needing wahine Māori there to voice their concerns. And today there are 13 wahine Māori in Te Whare Mere. However, we must remember and acknowledge the work of all mana wahine. Era wahine arataki ai tātou, leading in various sectors, hākina sports, business and innovation, the revitalisation of te reo Māori, me ona tikanga, our wahine who continue to be the first voices out on our marae, each and every one of them leading the way and personifying those values of leadership exemplified by mai tupuna Miri te tai Mangakahia 126 years ago. I reflect on the opportunities that I have the privilege to participate in through my whānau, my hapori and my community. And it's not by accident, but by maintenance of that maara, that miri, she sowed the seed 126 years ago. And drawing on the experiences and learnings of my tūpuna, I have been thinking about this more lately, where I too am currently in a role advocating for tāngata Māori to have their voice heard in Parliament. I currently am a part of a great team at the Electoral Commission. I'm a senior project leader for the Māori electoral option, which is about giving Māori a choice in how they're represented in Parliament, encouraging our people to participate in this electoral process, this process that was set down before us 125 years ago. And the mahi that I do today, and it's a privilege and an honour to do, is a continuation of the work that my tūpuna Miri and other mana wahine started 125 years ago. Kia ora tātou. Ko te aroha no he wai, e pupu ake ana. Something special this evening through whakapapa and whakaro, so thank you to you and your whānau for being here this evening. Our final speaker this evening, I'd like to invite you up, Julia Whakaputanga.
E te puere au moko puna, I tau huri huri tua nui tangata, nei ra e kakano, whakatūanga, whakatūanga, whakatūngia. He me I tuatahi I te whare e tūnei te nākoe, e ngā mana whenua o I tēnei rohi mauri ora ki a koutou. E ngā manawa ora, tēnā koutou katoa, tai mai nei ki te kaupapa o I tēnei pō, e ngā mana wahine, e ngā wahine toa, tēnā koutou katoa, e ngā e oku tōkana, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko ai au, he mokopuna au ngō ngā tiparau, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora everybody. It's a privilege to get to sit alongside and hear the kōrero of my tōkana today, and also to stand here on the shoulders of giants, which is the Wahine that have held me up in my life and have walked before me and still surround me today, and all of us. So on this kaupapa, it's a privilege to be here. And I think when we talk about democracy and politics in New Zealand, that it's in my whakapapa in a way. My last name is Whaipoti, and Whai means to chase and Poti means votes. And My last name was created a few generations ago when, by my dad's papa's line, my kōrero was whāngai into the whai kōti whānau from East Coast, and that name was created to tautoko Aotearoa Ngāta, who ran for Parliament, sort of the first Māori MPs and from home to be in Parliament. And the reason why my whānau got behind that movement and him was because we could see or believed in the potential that central government has to impact either negatively or positively on the lives of our whānau and our communities. And because the decisions that are made in that house trickle down, unlike money, into our hapori. And so we wanted to follow in that step. And I have to say, and I just want to acknowledge you, Marama, as one of our few team, Wahine Māori, who are in the house today, and I know also that didn't happen by accident. But I believe in learning the tools of the Pākehā in order to whakamana my whānau and our people. But that's come about more out of necessity, I think. If we look at the consequences and the historical harms that colonisation is living and breathing, when we look at our prison population today, that is the ongoing living consequences of colonisation. And for me, I was the first in my whānau to go to university and I studied law. And I did that because I wanted to make money. And also I got told a lot growing up that I could do that because I talk a lot, and that's what lawyers do. But in that process as well, I learnt about how laws have been created to actively harm Māori in our history, and we still see that today. It's less overt, but how have laws been responsible, and the application of laws been responsible for for just dumb things in our community? So I'm a staunch advocate along with many people around changes in our criminal justice system, because I believe the criminal justice system in our prison and how it touches families and the people that live in our prisons as a reflection of the things that we have failed to address in our society to address those social issues. And when we talk about women getting the right to vote, back in the day, 1893, as Māori women, we were advocating for rights. We already had advocates for rights to contribute in discussions and power in decision-making situations that we already had pre-colonisation. The mana wairua, the stream ruas too. The mana in Tane and Wahine are needed to create the balance. And then to have to push to vote and to participate in the suffrage movement, and at what cost did that come? When we talk about our tipuna having a moko kauwai meant that they couldn't participate in the suffrage movement. And these are things that I think as New Zealand we can't forget. We get celebrated and held up for these things. We get celebrated. I was over in New York recently at the United Nations being like, don't build the mega prison, don't build the mega prison, because structuration, racism hurts our people, and because the evidence and research tells us that prisons take people and release them into the communities and families that they come from more broken than when they entered. And while I was there, New Zealand government got held up as being thebomb.com with dealing with Indigenous people because we have a treaty settlement process. And there was an interactive dialogue where it was the Pacific countries, so we had our New Zealand government representatives and any interested Indigenous people, so I was sitting right there being like, hey guys, and the chair of that kōrero acknowledged New Zealand as having our treaty settlement process, and then our government spoke proudly that we have given $2.2 billion to treaty settlements redress to date. And then I was there, so I put my hand up and I said, yes, acknowledge that it is important to have these structures. But when $2.2 billion is the cost of running our prisons for 2 years, we spend over $1 billion every year to incarcerate our people, and largely our people fill those statistics because of treaty breaches and the failures of us to address those. That's not something to be celebrated. And when I was standing there as well, when we have Yes, we have a treaty. Yes, Māori is recognised as an official language. Yes, we have this tribunal. But then when our rangatahi are dying of suicide at such ridiculous, at the highest rates of OECD, we cannot celebrate that as a country. And so when I think about participation and democracy, these things are important, and what they symbolise is important, allowing women to vote in this process, in this colonial process that we have got uplifted from another country to us. That is important. Seeing Wahine Māori, for me, is really important to see that reflected in central government, because for me it says it's possible. In order to be, you have to see it is possible to effect change for our people. But the personal is the political, not just this process. My mum lives in Australia because she moved us there when I was young, because she couldn't see a future for us here as Māori in New Zealand. And for me, my parents, they moved us across, and I came back and I've stayed. They had to move back because there wasn't enough work for them to support our whānau the way that we want to. But for me, the cost, watching my mum grow up, watching my mum speak out, tino whakamā, like I'd be really embarrassed that my mum would call stuff out all the time. And now I'm that embarrassing auntie roaming around. But that is political. The decisions that my mum made every day and that our mothers make and our grandparents make, that is political. And whilst I carry this whakapapa and live in central Wellington and advocate for the change that laws can have on communities as much as I can, that is an important thread in the story of our history, present and future. But it's not lost on me the cost that it comes to my whānau, that I don't have my mum in my community directly, although she's always living on Facebook and on my phone. But that's a cost. Like, that's a cost for me to not have the mana wahine that I followed around me daily. But that also comes with responsibilities and obligations that I carry, because we don't just walk ourselves, and we represent our tūpuna and our whānau and our kids to come. But I think it is important to acknowledge the wins that we've had in New Zealand, but to see the contemporary, what are the costs today in New Zealand? Do we really have equal decision making? When we battle in New Zealand, we've battled so much as Māori to retain our culture, our cultural identity as Māori, that we don't get a chance to scrap it out as Māori, although it certainly happens. But we are too busy retaining our cultural identity in central government, being like, this is what being Māori is. But what does that look like when it's tāne Māori who are filling government positions or ministry positions, and that you have, and that Whaia Michelle has to think about whether or not she can accept that role, because we're participating in processes that replicate colonisation in a way where the role of wairua and the balance between tāne and wahine has been diluted, where we have positions that see tāne Māori speaking for us. I said I wasn't going to talk about that, but I forgot. But I'm hopeful about, and we have to be, otherwise we give up on our mokopuna and our obligations, we negate our responsibilities to exist today, and what are the changes that we need to move forward, because our tūpuna before us pushed down walls and barriers so that we can see further into the horizon, and our responsibility in this generation is to knock over the further barriers so that our mokopuna can take for granted some of the struggles that we see today as we do, such as voting and participating in that process. But I'll leave it there because I'm a fan of Kai Kōrero. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Ka whine a koe au, ki te whine o te aroa, ki te whine kore nei e waikura e. Tai timu, tai whari, tai hoa e haere, ko mutu taku riri e
whakaaro, whaitikanga, mōna tēnā koe. Well, one of the things about having panels is that you seek to get diverse views and diverse voices, and I think we've achieved that this evening. So I want to send a collective mihi to all of our panel this evening. That's the Gita, Moana, Mona, Julia and Michelle, tēnā koutou mō tō kōrero. Now another part of that is of course including those of you who have come along to listen and to share your whakaaro as well. So for the next 20 minutes, and we've got 20 minutes, we've got a bit of time, I'm going to huri te rākau, I'm going to open the floor. For those of you who would like to ask a question or share your whakaaro on the kaupapa this evening. So I think we've got a free-standing roving mic, is that right? Oh, cool, right. So we've got 20 minutes. So if you want to have a kōrero, just kind of signal to us that you'd like to, and we'll do a quick head count. I'd like to ensure that everyone gets a bit of time. If you put your hand up, that you get a kōrero. So how long you get with the mic depends on how many other people have their hands up. But if you don't get an opportunity, we are still going to break away for Kai and kōrero in that room as well. So we'll open the floor for 20 minutes and then we'll go through, I'll do a karakia, we'll have a waiata together, and then we'll go and have Kai and kōrero. Kia ora. So you've got our mic there, haven't you? Yeah. There's two mics there. Our panel may have reflections on one another's kōrero, and that's fine too. All right, kia ora.
I just have a question, and it's about the imprisonment of Māori in New Zealand. I can't see how not abolishing 3 strikes is going to help that. What do you see as the solutions to this issue? Because clearly what we've been doing over the past century or so hasn't been working.
I'll just talk loud. Kia ora mō tō pātai. Yes, it hasn't been working. The way that we've addressed criminal justice issues in this country have been fundamentally uplifted from the United States, really. It's a broken system that doesn't work for our people, and it's inherently racist. And statistically, it's racist. And we know that every step of the way there are different worse off outcomes for Māori than non-Māori. That's what racism looks like in policy legislation and how it operates. Where Māori are 3 times more likely to be stopped by police, Māori are 3 times more likely to be charged. If convicted, Māori are 11 times more likely to be remanded in prison. If convicted, we are 7 times more likely to be sentenced to prison. And so today, the government, a couple of weeks ago, they're not going to commit to building a mega prison, which is a commitment, which would have been a commitment to and perpetuation of a broken system and an acceptance of the harms of colonisation, and saying to me and to New Zealand that there's something inherently criminal about being Māori. And if that was the case, then we wouldn't just have, then all of us working in Māori working in flash jobs or when secure incomes, we would be filling those prisons too. But we know that comes from a very small community, and intergenerationally that carries on. How that needs to, what the solutions of that look like, I'm a firm believer in giving us the keys, Māori the keys, the opportunity and time for us to have responses about what it looks like in prison. There's some immediate things that need to happen. We need to repeal the Bail Amendment Act 2013 that came into play, and because of a political legislative change, we saw our remand population double. So we saw a third of people in prison have not been sentenced to prison, and half of those people will not get sentenced to prison. And that happened because of a law change. And when Māori are 11 times more likely to be remanded in prison, then you know who's filling the prisons even more. So there's some immediate things. Repeal the Bail Amendment Act first and foremost, but I think we need to empower communities, because a Ngāti Porou response to people living in Ngāti Porou land's going to look different than a Southland response or a Tūhoe response or an Aotearoa response. But
I think we need to there's a distribution of power and resource to allow communities to come with better responses than our justice system currently has. When we spend $100,000 on one person to fill a prison bed a year, then we send them out to the community with nothing and wait for them to come back. That's wrong. Give $100,000 to that whānau and wrap around services around that whānau, and then we can see, breaking into generational imprisonment of our people. There's a lot more stuff around that, but that's my...
Thank you for your question.
Well, talking about democracy and civic democracy, I think we've got a lot of work to do. So if we look at participation of Māori in local government elections, in school board elections, even in marae committees, how it flows through in treaty settlement processes, there is much more still to be done to encourage people to see the value of participating in what I call, civil society. Some participate and end up in places like the prisons, and not everyone does get to vote sometimes, even if they're able to. So understanding the value that comes with being able to exercise an opportunity that not everybody has around the world is something that's quite uniquely Aotearoa New Zealand focused. But as if we're to, as we all know, we see Aotearoa New Zealand changing. We see our demographics changing. We see the way in which our whānau interact in the school system and in the health system. So how do we exercise what really matters and what these women stood up for? And, we've been thinking hard about how do we encourage Māori whānau and Wahine as part of that to see one way to exercise what they have, what we have here at home, is by getting in there and having your say. And civics is a really important kaupapa that if you all did your surveys of your whānau about what you learned about civics at school or around your whānau table, it's quite variable just how many of us talk about these sort of things. And if we even just look back at our own tables when we were growing up, or our grandparents' tables, there are some things that we have to improve and change. And change because actually it does mean you have a say, or at least are able to participate in what we want the Aotearoa New Zealand to look like here at home. And so really encouraging, that's why these celebrations are so important, because we actually don't sometimes appreciate what we have until it gets taken off us. Now, I know it's not going to get taken off us, but the possibility that not all of our whānau participate in civil society is a big deal. And it's one of the reasons why one of the outcomes for whānau ora is participating in society, so that actually whānau don't just live in their own bubble, but they connect and relate to people that they see at Countdown or Pick and Say, that when they go to the side of the rugby or netball fields, they just see the value of participating in society and opening the minds of their whānau and their mokopuna and their children and their aunties, cousins, etc. That all matters, particularly as the world moves to more digital ways of communicating with each other. So, being able to value what our forebearers did for us, I don't think we really
see ourselves. When I decided to have my moko kauai done and talk to my mum, she was horrified. She said to me, people are going to think you are against them or you're a criminal and treat you that way. I couldn't understand how something that is inherently mine by birth could make me look like a criminal, or have me thrown out of a pub or stopped on the street and criticised, which has happened lots of times, but mostly by our own. Yeah, that's been a real hard thing, is that a lot of that criticism has come from our own and how they see themselves. And I'm all for women getting their moko kauai and uplifting that part of themselves and us as Māori women. But that journey is really hard. And I'm not a criminal because I have a moko kauai. But that is the internal racism that my mother lived with her whole life. We grew up with the same, her mother was who brought me up. And I had this totally different upbringing to my mum. So my mum lived in this time where she couldn't speak Māori, was punished for it. I grew up with the same mother who raised her, who only spoke Māori to me. I never knew she spoke English till I was 7. So the contrast in the way that I was raised and the way that my mother saw herself as a Māori woman was sad, just really sad. And I think we need to kind of change that, can't we? Amongst our women, because the women are the nurturers, the first face you look up at when you're a baby. So,
with my mahi through the Māori electoral option, there have been some great opportunities to hang out with some of our communities at the various huihuinga around the motu, and we continue to do so for another couple of weeks. It's interesting to hear directly from our communities why they may or may not participate in this democratic process. Some of their feedback is around, I don't even know that person that I'm supposed to be voting for, so why should I participate? Or I don't believe my voice is being heard. So being able to talk through some of those concerns and some of those kōrero, and I really appreciate being able to do that kanohi with some of our whānau out there on the ground. And I think, the option has given me that opportunity, and the Electoral Commission have given me that opportunity for myself even, to understand how we can participate in that process.
Well, I just really want to acknowledge, Julia, what you said in your speech, because I didn't want to take up too much time giving a speech, but I think that the really vitally important point that you've made is that yes, we're here reflecting on the past, but actually the past has left us in a situation that is fundamentally unfair, and I think that part of the discussions we have around Suffrage 125, and I'm glad that you've brought this, is how we're going to change things in the future together, and in a way that actually does reflect the perspectives and the right of every person born in Aotearoa, recognizing, or who's come here like me, not born in Aotearoa, but that those haven't had their rights, and that there is systemic injustice in the system as it is now, and how do we get people to engage in an unjust system in order to change it and make it just? I think that is the big challenge, and so we are trying to do this through this forum and many other fora. And what I really want to know is what we can all do to take this further, so that we can make those changes that need to happen, so that so that people don't feel alienated from the system that should be theirs.
Minister, for that. I just want to take this chance as well, because with Mona running the Māori electoral roll stuff, so whānau Māori, you can be on the Māori roll, you can be on the general roll. But she can't take a position, but I can. I'm on the Māori roll, and the reason why I am is very political, for a change. But what I just want to say, when there are discussions around participation in a democratic process, that's a majority voice process, which is why we see there are no Māori seats in local council. We've seen Hobson Pledge succeed in running a majority voice based on scaremongering and ignorance around participation of Māori. What does that mean at the table? I don't know what people think that means, but we have a problem in New Zealand about what the narrative is about us. But initially, when there's discussions as well around in central government, should we have Māori seats? And I want to say that is for Māori to decide. And initially, when those laws were passed in 1867 about Māori representation in Parliament, it gave us 4 seats, and Māori had to vote for those 4 seats when our population
we should have had 17 seats. So it limited our representation and our voice and power to participate in a process. And now there's conversations about we don't need Māori seats because we've got all of these Māori in Parliament. Are they advocating for the interests that affect Māori? I'm looking at you, Simon Bridges, are you doing that? I'm looking at you, if we are Māori because you whakapapa Māori, but that's a difference from advocating for Māori within a political system. So I'm all about saying in those seats, if I know Māori, get on the Māori seats, or your mahi is to get home and get whānau to get on those seats. Second thing that I was going to take on as well is that we took away the right for prisoners to vote. And I have a problem with that. Why is I say we have an ongoing responsibility while it exists. That's a problem because we're disengaging an already actively disengaged group of people. Because why do people want to participate in a system that doesn't reflect us and doesn't see us? Which is why I said it's important for me to see people like Māori or Māori women in Parliament. It's important for me to see that that's possible, and I know that it's really important for me to do stuff so that my nephews can see stuff and all of that. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
So that's the paradox, isn't it? Are we in the system, out of the system? That is a very real paradox for some whānau.
Tēnā tātou katoa. Ki te wāhine tū ia mātou mō te kōrero. Ahakoa mō tētahi kaupapa e rereke ko te kaupapa o taku tamahine mō rite ki tōna mahi. Te tino engari kauri ai mōhua te ingoa Māori mō Prau. Mō koutou e tū ana hoki. Engari ka mitu taku kōrero, ngā mihi nui ki a koutou kua tū rua i a mātou.
I'll take that as we're ready for Kai Kōrero. So this is what we'll do here. We do have a pātai. Aroha mai, can you?
Kia ora tātou. I just wanted to ask a question about constitutional reform. And I have to meet two of my tupuna who also signed Te Tiriti Waitangi out here in Port Nicholson. And I wanted to comment because I remember in my research that at the time Te Tiriti Waitangi was signed, there was one comment that it was effectively a wedding gift for Queen Victoria and her husband, Prince Albert. And I remember when I was a young student with a paid student loan, that I felt slightly aggrieved back in the late 80s and early 90s because I remember my tupuna who fought in all of the successive wars up into the present day Afghanistan for king and country. So I wanted to invite the panel to comment on the concept of mana wahine and tino Rangatiratanga and how it will affect our rights as wahine Māori in current society and the current constitutional configuration that we have, including our right to vote and to petition the United Nations and to stand in Parliament, effectively. And I only say that because I know that before us we're beginning a consultation process or deliberations on a very important piece of legislation, and it's going to be called the Crown Māori Relations Bill, I think is the name of the kaupapa or the taki. Kia ora tātou.
Do a quick response to that. I firmly believe that we don't get tino Rangatiratanga o mana motuhaki within our Westminster system, but our ability to participate in that is an extension of our ability to practice our tino Rangatiratanga, because we're making decisions about that. And also, before the treaty we had He Whakaputanga, so we're a sovereign nation, and the constitutional discussions that we're having as a country. There's been that huge constitutional review that was done a few years back by Moana Jackson and Magabotu and Mai Tiki Mai. That has some, I think that's where we need to be looking at when we're talking about what does constitutional review look like and what could it look like. And it's not just like what people get frustrated with fluffy, wish-washy stuff. There's proposed models about what that could look like within the system, and I think we've got answers there. What we've struggled with within our political landscape across the road is to act on those when we're balancing the voices of so many people. And who are the loudest and the strongest voices? In democracy, it's a majority. So, that's what I'm saying about that.
I think exercising Rangatiratanga is one thing, and I suppose is my personal view, that as Wahine we always ought to be exercising our own Rangatiratanga. Tino Rangatiratanga I think is like 10 steps up, and if we were truly exercising Tino Rangatiratanga, we'd live in paradise. Because people would be able to know that when they are doing something, they are acting in the interests of somebody else, not in their own interest, which I think is what Rangatiratanga does. So both of those ideas are constitutional, and they have a cascade all the way down to whānau. Te Puni kōkiri with the previous government was supporting a review, or a constitutional review, where a report was provided to the then ministers. And I suppose there are a lot of dimensions of what the constitution means. And we could have another kōwhau on that for about another 4 hours if we wish. But I think it's a really important question, and I would encourage us to think carefully about the ideas that are associated with Rangatiratanga and Tino Rangatiratanga and what they mean for kāwanatanga, because they are reflective of changing modern Aotearoa New Zealand, even when we have many points of view on lots of different dimensions. So ought there to be an analysis of the role or mana wahine as part of that. I know that there has been a claim lodged with the Waitangi Tribunal that will probably ask a number of us that work in government to provide some insight to that. We'll have to see when that comes along, and I think it will probe the ideas of Rangatiratanga, Tino Rangatiratanga and kāwanatanga. And because they don't exist in isolation, they do exist within political constructs. It's going to make for a very fascinating thesis by many people, to which I acknowledge our tuahine who did a lot of research and study in that kaupapa. So our political system relies on part of that. The government system is trying to do some work inside that. And I think we are brave and courageous in Aotearoa, and some of the things that we do here, as I look across other Indigenous people's development, while we might still be behind and not quite get there, the way in which our political system with ministers and different governments have interacted with the idea of Rangatiratanga and Tino Rangatiratanga is quite impressive, notwithstanding a lot of work that we've still got to do.
Kia ora, Michelle, and kia ora to our panel this evening, and thank you to you all for joining us this evening on this really important kaupapa. I'm glad we had the opportunity for a few questions, but I'm not going to hold us up any longer here. The Kai Kōrero is about us mingling together, so if you've got questions for the panel or you want to share your whakaro with other people, that's what this session is for. So what we're going to do from here is I'm going to close our formal speaking session with a karakia, and then I invite you all to stand up with us and have a waiata together. And before we move over to the kai, I'll quickly bless that as well. So we're doing 2 karakia, we're extra blessed this evening if you like. So I'll close with our karakia now. Tū taua mai raro, tū taua mai roto, tū taua mai waho, kia tau ai te mauri tū te mauri ora ki te katoa. Haunie, tai e tū tātou.